Before I elaborate on the situation in Afghanistan today, I would invite each one of you to think back to Afghanistan in 2001.
Mahmoud Saikal, a diplomat, strategist, and one of the most respected voices on Afghanistan's foreign policy. With over 30 years of experience in international relations, Saikal has represented Afghanistan at some of the highest levels, from the United Nations to key regional dialogues shaping the future of peace and security. He served as Afghanistan's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York between 2015 and 2019, playing a pivotal role in advancing the country's global presence and advocating for rights and dignity of its people. A former Deputy Foreign Minister and Ambassador to Australia, he has consistently worked across governments, academia, and civil society, bridging diplomacy with development. Today, Mahmoud Saikal continues his engagement as a scholar and advisor, contributing to international think tanks, speaking on conflict resolution, and working towards a peaceful, inclusive, and sovereign Afghanistan. In a time of uncertainty, his voice remains steady, a reminder that diplomacy, when rooted in justice, can still move nations. Today, in an exclusive episode of the Intelligence Spotlight series, he has joined us for a powerful discussion on diplomacy, soft power, and the future of Afghanistan. Welcome everyone to the Intelligence Spotlight series exclusive episode with Afghanistan's former ambassador to the United Nations and the former Deputy Foreign Minister of Economic Affairs, Mr. Mahmoud Saikal. Welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Ambassador, before we start our conversations, I'd rather have a very unusual question for you. I'm sure nobody asked you this before in the interviews. So you have represented Afghanistan at the highest international levels. But before all of that, there must have been a younger Mahmoud Saikal who was dreaming of the world, who was dreaming of his future. What did you dream of becoming when you were young?
Well, I was a teenage. Before that, I didn't know what I was going to become. But when I was in year 9 of Istiklal High School in Kabul, I developed a keen interest in architecture, and my dream was to become an architect. And I worked for that. So parallel, I think the events in Afghanistan brought me to politics and diplomacy. But my profession of choice has always been architecture and being an architect. And I did pursue that in Australia, and eventually I got 2 degrees in architecture, and I worked as an architect for a few years. And I must say that architecture helped me becoming a rather practical diplomat. And often when I talk to the host countries, foreign ministers or ministers, they laughed and they told me, take my architecture hat off because it's costing them too much. Because I was a practical diplomat and I was trying to see at the end of the day, getting the job done rather than being very theoretical and talking a lot and not doing much.
That's quite interesting. I think we share some of those interests. I also graduated from Istiklal High School in Afghanistan.
Okay.
And
So vous parlez français?
oui, je parle français, mais un peu.
Un petit peu.
Yeah. I totally forgot it over the years because we were more focused on learning English than for education than French. So today's discussion is primarily focused on diplomacy, soft power, and how Afghanistan's diaspora can strategize their efforts to counterbalance some of the influences from within the Afghanistan and the Taliban themselves. And interestingly, whenever we talk about diplomacy comes from a state, from a country. But now we don't have that state. A lot of our diplomats, most of them are outside of the country. And currently Afghanistan is under the rule of the Taliban. However, efforts are undergoing by different groups outside of Afghanistan, especially in the diaspora community. However, there are particular important points and parts of these efforts that needs to be addressed. One is the topic of soft power, what soft power is, and how the diaspora can strategize their efforts and think more critically about approaching Afghanistan and rebuilding their country, let's say, imagine post-Taliban. And Mr. Ambassador, in your opinion, in your experience from working within Afghanistan as Deputy Foreign Minister, as well as later as the Afghanistan's UN representative, how do you define soft power? What is soft power? And for a country like Afghanistan, and especially for the diaspora, what diaspora can do best to enhance soft power in terms of pushing their own strategies and changing policies of foreign countries towards Afghanistan?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me to attend this rather interesting podcast. Just listening to your questions, I think we need to know what kind of world we live in now. The world that we live in today is quite different from the days that I was a diplomat and from the days that I was a deputy foreign minister. While Afghanistan experiences setbacks, the world experiences remarkable scientific growth, bringing the natural and social sciences and other forms of knowledge closer together. But also, at the same time, we should remember that science is a source of knowledge and a tool of power. According to some experts that I've been studying lately, we are in the post-truth era, unfortunately, where objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotions and personal beliefs. And that's why I admire what you're doing, trying to establish facts. Trust in many international and national institutions and conventions and agreements have declined, especially in multilateral institutions that we have been building since the Second World War. I'm afraid the explosion of social media hasn't helped. It has allowed people to reinforce their biases and ignore inconvenient evidence. It has fueled the transmission of disinformation and conspiracy theories, and it has undermined the use of scientific knowledge. We also experience populism a lot against science and facts. This denies facts to define truth and have a place in decision making. Also, in the new geopolitical landscape, countries dedicate more and more resources towards defense and security in a sort of self-centric way. So we see the retreat from globalization, we experience weakened multilateralism, and we see countries are moving to be focused on their own utilitarian needs with fixation in nationalism and short-termism, if I coin it that way. And also, another thing that is becoming very evident is the fact that at the heart of politics, keyword, power and power struggle are more dominant than public service. You know, in my old days, being a politician or being a diplomat was supposed to be public service. But nowadays, they're thinking more about power and power struggle when it comes to public service. We live in a world where power struggle is being pursued by means of intelligence, which is running miles and miles ahead of diplomacy, academia, and media, sometimes even completely against public opinion. So, having said that, I can come to your questions now. I thought it was necessary just to say a few words about the kind of world that we live in. What is soft power? And how can Afghanistan's diaspora effectively utilize it to bring positive change in the country? My understanding of soft power is the ability to influence others through cultural and economic means rather than use of force. And I was a firm believer of development of Afghanistan, and I was in key positions to actually do that. When I was a diplomat serving as ambassador in Australia and also in the UN and also as a counselor in Japan. And also, for a time, I was a deputy foreign minister, and my portfolio was economic cooperation. I identified that Afghanistan had a number of soft power potentials where we had competitive advantages from little things like our hospitality, which was very much in common throughout the country, north, south, east, west. And a lot of people who went to Afghanistan, when they came out, the first thing they said that Afghanistan was hospitable. And with hospitality, of course, comes our music, artists, and so. Our costume of our different ethnic groups were very eye-catching to a lot of people. Our diversity, our literature, we have had the greatest poets probably in the world, a person like Maulana, Jalaluddin Balkhi, who's known as Rumi to the rest of the world. I remember some 10 years ago, I went to the Istanbul Grand Bazaar and I noticed the Samar dancing of Maulana and the poetry of Maulana almost on everything that they were selling, from plates to glasses to pottery of different kinds. And one of them, as I bought it and I was talking about Rumi, and I told him that Rumi is originally from Afghanistan. He said, "Well, your Darwish is now determining the price of our market, centuries and centuries after he is gone." And also having great personalities like Hafiz and Sadi and Bidil, and also from Pashto language, we've had the Khushal Khan and Rahman Baba and also Ali Sherin Awai and so on. So all of this, an asset, is something that we could really use as soft power. And of course, products like carpets, pottery, mosaic tiles, blue glass, making of Herat, our dry fruits, some stage, our fresh fruits, our saffron, we can really compete not only in our region, but also around the world. And when it comes to our natural resources, like oil and copper and iron ore and gas and lithium and so on. And also our geopolitical our geographic location, I should say, and of course geopolitical too. I used that when I was at the UN, and I was arguing that we could be a platform of cordiality. And the word that I used very carefully was cordiality and amity and friendship and trust between countries of the region and the rest of the world. But of course, they were the potentials of Afghanistan, and they are still the potentials of Afghanistan. And I take it that that will be in a post-Taliban era. Otherwise, how can we use soft power to get to a period of transition at the moment? Because the Taliban is an obstacle in front of us. We can argue that we have all those potentials that our own people, the neighboring countries, the surrounding regions, and the rest of the world can benefit from if, only if, we have legitimacy in governance in Afghanistan. Otherwise, the Taliban have control over most of those potentials at the moment, and they are trading them in return of strengthening their military and ideological grips over the country. And I'm afraid our world of realpolitik is unfortunately biting. This may have some short-term sweetness for some countries, but of course, it will definitely have medium-term and long-term headaches for all of us. So I hope I've responded to your first question. I don't know to what extent that I've really addressed that.
You did absolutely great with opening up the whole topic for us, because now I think we'll go much more deeper into this topic and how best we can learn from your experience and knowledge in that regard. So currently, millions of people from Afghanistan, they live abroad, and many of them are educated, and and engaged in civil society, media, and advocacy effort. Yet, we often hear their voices remain scattered or limited in reach somehow. But from your experience with international diplomacy and regional cooperation, what are some strategic ways the diaspora can engage with soft power beyond just traditional lobbying to create long-term impact and also influence policies somehow?
Well, of course, you have to have the skills, and then when it comes to skills, diplomacy is in the forefront. And it looks like 20 years of the Republic produced a lot of talents. We've had so many ministers, deputy ministers, MPs, members of parliament. We've had ambassadors. We've had so many diplomats. But generally, the Republic equipped our talents to be able to talk not only to their own people, but to the region and to the rest of the world. Unfortunately, the bulk of them have left the country and they are scattered in the region and around the world. So, ideally, when it comes to interaction with the rest of the world, we're talking of diplomatic skills, but also communication skills. And it looks like we do have that. We are rich in that area. Let me come to diplomacy first. In diplomacy, we have track one and track two. Track one is very much the officials talking, the officials of the countries. And track two is those who have got the experience, but no longer members of the official world and no longer members of the government. But they do have the experience. They're either retired diplomats, politicians, specializing in specific areas. Track one at the moment is half missing, simply because Afghanistan doesn't have an official voice. The Taliban neither have legitimacy at home, nor they have legitimacy in the region, nor beyond the region. But at the same time, as a de facto administration on the ground, they do have half of the official voice. Unfortunately, from time to time, they are being dragged to the official world, and we've got a number of platforms in the region. We've got the foreign ministers of the neighboring countries of Afghanistan. From time to time, they come together and they discuss Afghanistan specifically. And for that, they invite somebody from the Taliban, and sometimes they don't. This is track one diplomacy, the status quo of the track one diplomacy. When it comes to track two, which is non-official, it looks like mostly track two has been occupied by the opponents of the Taliban. Every day we see probably dozens of meetings between former officials of Afghanistan, former MPs, former ministers, former deputy ministers, former civil society activists, leaders, and all that, meeting either officials or non-officials in the host countries wherever they are. But unfortunately, as you said, that it is very much scattered and it's in desperate need of coordination. We're meeting, but we are not coordinating among ourselves. There's very little. I'm not saying that there isn't coordination at all. There is some level of coordination, but certainly not sufficient. How to coordinate this? It requires special efforts, and a number of processes have been born in the past couple of years. Vienna process is one of them, where every now and then political and civil and military groups come together and they interact and they try to exchange views. But to be honest with you, I haven't seen enough speed in there to really coordinate things and have a common vision with which different groups and different personalities could work. The other thing is, when it comes to the use of diplomacy, you have to have the right enablers for good diplomacy. As you know, foreign policy is a continuation of domestic policies. So how organized we are internally, because as a diplomat, my job is to know, what is a specific policy on certain issues so that I can go and push the diplomacy for it. Diplomats often, they get instructions from their capital. when the Republic was on, before the fall of the Republic, although I resigned from the Republic, from government in early 2019. But in reality, our embassies and our consulates around the world were taking instructions from Kabul. And governments put policies together, and the diplomats worked for the implementation of those policies and also for the strategies, for the bigger strategies. Nowadays, I think it's the job of our political groups and our civil groups and military groups opposing the Taliban, how best they could have an internal structure and how could they have their own unity and coordination and how clear is the vision that they have or the strategy that they have. And also whether they have prepared, if they've prepared a vision, is that based on the actual facts and intelligence, or is it very theoretical? How practical is it? All those things will help a diplomat to go outside and talk to the rest of the world. I've been in the world of diplomacy since 1993, a good part of it in government and another good part of it in track two. The bitter experience that I have had that quite a few times I have managed to bring to draw the attention of the host country where I've been a diplomat or draw the attention of the UN. And when I give it to my government, it hasn't been strong enough to really digest that and to really bite and to work with it. Mm-hmm. As a result of that, I have lost reputation too. And in track two is the same thing. Just a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I worked with a very prominent personality in the world who had served as a prime minister in her own country and had served at the highest, very ranking level of the UN. And then I managed to get her attention, really connect her with a particular group of the opposition. Unfortunately, the group didn't know how to work with her. And as a result of that, she's very disheartened now. She's no longer there. So it's important for a diplomat to know that, okay, I work hard, I get the attention of the host country or the host organization, being it an international organization or, I don't know, different kind of organizations. But when you, at the end of the day, when you do get the attention, when you do get the interest, and when you do get an individual, an official, or an organization to come and help, we must have the local framework to digest that, to bite that, to work with that. A few times, I have been through a bitter experience that we didn't have that. And this is why my interest nowadays is more on the domestic policies, on the structure of the opposition of the Taliban. Sometimes, whenever I talk about that, I know it's not very much welcome, but there is a real need. Unless I know that I'm standing on a solid ground, it will be very difficult for me to be a successful diplomat. The enablers of diplomacy is important. Now, when it comes to our young, how could they have activities that could bring meaningful, positive change? I think once you leave your country, the influence that you have in that country is a lot less than being inside the country.
Right.
I've studied the experience of Lebanon and other war-torn countries. It looks like the diaspora community don't have a lot of say about the future of that country. And in the case of Afghanistan, a significant percentage of our elite has left the country. So it is important that we should all try to relate to the geography of Afghanistan as much as possible. And we do our best to be in touch with the people on the ground. Mm-hmm. And this could be through the use of technology and also taking the risk of going inside the country. We did that during the first resistance. I remember I was a young architect in Sydney. I worked for 4.5 years for Public Works Department of New South Wales government. I actually resigned from an established job and I joined the resistance and I worked. And I went to Afghanistan when the Taliban had captured 80% of the country. I took the risk. So I think taking the risk is important, getting ready for a bit of sacrifice. There is a saying in our own language, as you know, that the road to heaven doesn't pass through the Persian or the quality carpet. Huh? So you have to work hard. Also, experience shows that we must have a geography where we can showcase the Afghanistan of non-Taliban camp. And this is why I firmly believe in the opposition that could be a combination of armed resistance, political resistance, and civil resistance. I know that the armed resistance has decided in the past couple of years not to really fight on the mountain, but to have urban war and guerrilla attacks, hit and run. That is the policy that they have undertaken. But I believe that they are experts in warfare. They are working on that, when to move to a stage where they could have a geography. Mm-hmm. I think having a geography is crucial. The other thing is that we see increasing number of groups being born every day or every now and then. So multiplicity and diversity is good, but we need to really rationalize multiplicity and diversity. To what extent there is a need to have a different group, and to what extent we could have a merger between different groups. I can see that in some areas there is a need to have different groups, but in some areas there is absolutely no logic, no reason that why we should have several groups who are doing the same thing. For a young national of Afghanistan or a person of origin from Afghanistan, you have got the choice. You have to look at your own capability. You have to see, okay, what can I do? Could I be at a very high level and at a very general level and really try to criticize the policies of the Taliban in the social media? Now, that's a form of opposition and it helps, but you have to be factual, of course. You cannot be very emotional there. But also, you shouldn't forget that we do have a psychological warfare, and from time to time, the Taliban are using the psychological warfare. So, how best we can do that too. And then, lower than that, how can I work with the environment where I am, with the local government, with the host country government? If there is something that they can do, how can we communicate with them? But really, how to be in touch with the 40 million people who are inside Afghanistan. There are different ways. I mean, right now I'm in contact with groups. I'm working with a number of groups inside Afghanistan. Quietly, underground, of course, they do have their difficulties. But if you listen to them, then you get the first-hand information from inside the country. Also, I believe that despite the fact that we don't hear about the meetings of the opposition group, local leaders, but they are meeting. Fair enough, there isn't international media to report that. There isn't even national free media to report that, but they're there. They are active. They even have meetings of group meetings, moving from village to village, from to district. I think it is important to stay in touch with them. So these are some of the thoughts that I had when it comes to your question.
Absolutely. These are really great suggestions as well, both for those outside of the country, but as well as the importance of people inside the country. And I think it relates to another question I was reading your article, which was published last year on The Spectator, titled How to Stop Illegal Immigration from Afghanistan. You didn't just comment on the migration crisis. It was a very diplomatic move, but actually it was more subtly reframed as a foreign policy failure tied directly to the Taliban's grip on power. You also proposed the National Resistance Front as a viable counterforce in that article, but in a tone that seemed calibrated more for policymakers than public sympathy, let's say. Was this a deliberate diplomatic approach you took, targeting British political decision makers by
Well,
aligning?
I think it's not only for the British,
Right.
because that particular it came out in a British newspaper,
Mhm.
and at the time it was picking up the topic, the hot topic in the United Kingdom. But
Mhm.
I think that applies to all other countries.
Yeah.
At the moment, you see the bulk of our population turning into a political football.
Right.
Um, on the one hand, inside the country, the Taliban has turned that into a hell for them, for our population, and they're being forced to leave Afghanistan and go to the neighboring countries of Iran and Pakistan in particular. A few of them managed to get to Central Asia. But then from Iran and Pakistan, they make beelines and they go all the way to Europe and to the other countries of the world.
Mhm.
Now, of course, we appeal to the international community to be as kind, as hospitable to the people of Afghanistan who reach them. They have been forced to leave the country. It's not a choice. But at the end of the day, the real solution is to make sure that Afghanistan becomes a habitable place for our population. You know, the UN, the UNOCHA, just announced that the population of Afghanistan is 46 million. Out of that, probably 8 or 10 millions are out. So we're talking of a very sizable population inside the country. And they face a very tough humanitarian situation. Human rights are being attacked every day, and it's getting tighter. The news is getting tighter and tighter and tighter. So I think the real solution is to make sure that we bring positive change inside Afghanistan. And this is why when we talk about positive change in Afghanistan, the first thing that comes to our mind is to bring legitimacy in governance.
Right.
If we do have a legitimate government which enjoys the support of our people and the trust of our people and the recognition of the international community, then our hands are open to bring positive change and to do the kind of thing that the good of the world could go inside Afghanistan. The way Afghanistan was between 2002 and 2005, that Afghanistan had turned into a symbol of international cooperation. I remember that I was ambassador outside, but I went to Afghanistan, I went to Kabul and to other provinces quite a lot during those years. I could see friends and foes. I could see the Americans and the Russians and the Chinese working together in Afghanistan. I could see even the Indians and the Pakistanis working together, being productive in Afghanistan, doing something positive. So I doubt that we will that level of support again. I think that was a golden opportunity that Afghanistan enjoyed. But if we do bring positive change inside Afghanistan, and when I say positive change in the forefront, is to make sure that we bring legitimacy in governance. And to be able to do that, we need to really chalk out a strategy how to get to a stage where we could have a transition period. Now, to go to the transition period from here, from where we are, we need to really, we've got two choices to make. One is to bring change through dialogue with the Taliban, and our experience of 30 years shows that that is not the language of the Taliban.
Right.
What we know as dialogue and negotiations and finding common ground, I'm afraid the Taliban see that as an opportunity to further elevate themselves politically and militarily. So this is why that we need to use a combination of armed resistance, political resistance, every kind of pressure that we know to drive the Taliban to a point where they could see their downfall, and therefore they have to give up to a genuine negotiations, not the kind of negotiations that they had in Doha,
Right.
but a genuine negotiation. And if they don't continue to be defiant, then I'm afraid that to see the downfall completely, so that we could enter this phase of transition where we could open up, where all the political, civil, and military actors of Afghanistan could come together
Right.
and really identify elements of a peace agreement in Afghanistan, and also identify a transition administration that could focus on a few things to take the country through the transition and pave the way for re-entering the era and somehow the people of Afghanistan.
Right. Going back to the cooperation that you discussed about how the Chinese, the Russians, and also the Americans were cooperating in Afghanistan, definitely that was a big mess on Afghanistan's side that it could not, maybe, or for reasons, wasn't able to utilize that and benefit from that in the long term. And of course, you've spent decades advocating for Afghanistan's interest on the global stage, especially in your diplomatic career. You've seen moments of also solidarity, but also moments of neglect, for sure. So, looking back, in your opinion, what were the key missed opportunities in the last 2 decades where diplomacy could have reshaped Afghanistan's trajectory?
I think during those years of 2002 and 2005, the US was a superpower. The Soviet Union had been through a disintegration, and Russian Federation was still struggling to reemerge. And China wasn't a dominant economy that it is today. It was still struggling. And therefore, there was a level of cooperation. And also because of 9/11, there was a great deal of sympathy towards the US. And because the population of Afghanistan had been through hell of the Taliban for 5 years, and also the resistance had lost Ahmad Shah Massoud, the key commander. So there was a great deal, and this is why in those years we succeeded to draft the constitution of Afghanistan. It wasn't a golden constitution, but it was a reasonably good constitution. Fair enough that it had a heavily centralized governance system in that constitution. But beyond that, it was a good constitution. And we drafted other laws. My feeling is that after the parliamentary election in 2005, where we had members of parliament, where we had the Senate and the House, as the President Karzai, as he started working with the laws of Afghanistan, he found his hands, he could see accountability. And this is where he had the choice of either working with the laws, especially the constitution, and with the Legislative Assembly of Afghanistan and with the independent judiciary. And really, even if it led his own downfall, he had to stick to the rule of law.
Right.
My feeling is that this is where he gave up. He started twisting the rule of law in favor of the continuation of his own rule. He moved towards tribalism. He moved towards ethnic politics instead of really saying that this is the constitution of Afghanistan. For example, in 2009, his term of office came to an end constitutionally. That was sometime in May 2009. The date was very clear in the constitution. President Karzai could have stood in front of the people of Afghanistan with the constitution in his hand and say, people of Afghanistan, this is the constitution of our country. According to this constitution, today is the end of my presidency. He didn't do that. He very quietly asked the Supreme Court or something, which was very an unconstitutional move, to extend his term of office, set a precedent, and then President Ghani did the same thing. So I think this is as far as the domestic policies are concerned. But of course, there were other factors. There were regional factors. For example, the duplicity of Pakistan, the mistakes of the US. Instead of consolidating the gains in Afghanistan, going to Iraq and really not paying enough attention to Afghanistan. So there was a combination of domestic policies, regional policies, and international policies that didn't work in Afghanistan and really led eventually to the downfall of the republic.
Indeed, there were a lot of instances, even for us, the young generation, that we now that analyze it, that we could have utilized a lot of opportunities in terms of diplomatic affairs, but also in terms of rebuilding the country, putting the people who actually have the skills, have the mind, and especially in areas of critical thinking, in areas of understanding the context of the country. We also felt that okay, it was not as utilized as it should have. But looking ahead, Mr. Ambassador, in moments of despair, nations often need visionaries to remind them of their cultural depth and diplomatic resilience. And you also have spoken a lot about hope as a form of strategy. What keeps your hope alive for Afghanistan's future, and what role does soft power play in that vision?
I think during my lifetime, I've seen the roller coaster quite a few times. I've seen the power play. I've seen the invasion of Afghanistan. And, when the Soviets with the Red Army occupied Afghanistan, we were finished. The rest of the world thought that Afghanistan was just like another Poland and another Czechoslovakia. It's finished. We're part of the Soviet Union. But with the passage of a couple of years, as we stood up on our own feet and we opposed the occupation of Afghanistan, then the morale went high among our people generally. And also the international community said, hang on, these people haven't given up. They are standing up for their freedom. And this is why we saw hands of support coming from different directions. Again, did we use the support wisely? That's debatable, but we have seen that. And also when the Taliban took over during the 1996 to 2001, they came in. I remember I was the honorary consul of Afghanistan in Australia when the Taliban occupied Kabul. I was very disheartened and I was just questioning myself, why? And I was so disheartened. I remember for a few weeks I was very upset. And then the new book of Nelson Mandela had came out, The Long Walk to Freedom. I remember I locked myself in a room and I read that in 1 week. It's a very thick book. And I could see the dark days of South Africa and how they worked together and how they reemerged again and again and again. But also, a couple of days after the Taliban occupied Kabul, we saw the return of the resistance, and Commander Massoud came back from the mouth of Panjshir all the way to Shamali Plain and hit back. And I remember in 1 day, Taliban lost some 600, 700 fighters. That proved that, hang on, we can stand up. So we've seen the ups and downs. And also, if you read the history of Afghanistan, you can actually see that Afghanistan has seen a lot of bad days. I mean, think about Changiz when he went to Herat, the number of people that he slaughtered and that he burned the entire city. You see the people of Afghanistan rising up again. And you see the occupation of Afghanistan in the 19th century by the British, how badly hit the country was and how the people worked hard, they paid the sacrifice, they eventually brought positive change. So I think for those of us who are aware of the history of Afghanistan, there is hope. But this time around, I'm afraid we have to pay a price for freedom and for justice and for equality. My concern is that post-Taliban, it is important that we must genuinely establish the rule of law and governance system, not individuals. It looks like the people of Afghanistan in different periods, when the country has collapsed, they have come out, they have paid a heavy price, they have brought positive change, but then whoever become the ruler, he has mistreated them, he has made personal deals with the foreigners, and really hasn't been able to consolidate gain properly. I think what we have learned from history and from the modern history of the country, that this time, this is my message to the opposition groups. Hang on, you know. First of all, we need a genuine review of the 20 years of the Republic. We need to really know what were the positive things that we did, what were the negative things that we did, what were the mistakes that we did. We need to really identify them. And what are the key recommendations to make sure that we don't repeat those mistakes?
Right.
I think if our politicians are not ready to accept that review, it means that we are going to misbehave again. It means that we are going to repeat those mistakes again. Mm-hmm. And the people of Afghanistan, they're questioning that. I mean, to the people, I'm in touch with them. They're just saying, hang on, okay, Taliban are bad, and we would like them to go. But what is the replacement of the Taliban?
Right.
Are we going to see such and such guy again bringing his family members to the ministry and really, bringing his son and his daughters and his family members doing these things and such corrupt elements and all those things, And this is why, instead of personalizing that, I would like to call for a genuine review of the 20 years of the Republic. The countries that work with Afghanistan during those 20 years, they've been doing their own reviews. Right now, we have the War Commission of the US. A few days ago, we saw the witnesses appearing in front of that War Commission. In Australia, they established a comprehensive investigation about what their forces did in Afghanistan. You might have heard about the Brereton report. General Brereton was assigned to really investigate, and he interviewed hundreds of officials in Afghanistan and hundreds in Australia. And after gathering 60,000 of evidence, he identified 25 soldiers of Australia out of 26,000 who served in Afghanistan, that those 25 were involved in war crimes in Afghanistan. And then he came up with 143 recommendations for the government to bring changes in the entire defense ministry of the country. And the governments of Australia, being it Labour or being it coalition government, they have committed themselves to really implement those recommendations. Similarly, Germany did it, and also countries of the region, Iran, they have all done their own reviews. Now, the people of Afghanistan, the 46 million, they have every right to see a review of the Republic based on their interest, not the interest of Pakistan, Iran, Russia, China, and the US, but based on the interest of the people of Afghanistan. We need to identify what was the good thing that we did, and we did a number of good things too. I've seen a lot of hardworking, honest people who worked during those 20 years of the Republic, and they brought positive change. Unfortunately, the mentality was that every time that we did something positive, we thought it's the foreigners who have done it. And everything that something went wrong, we thought it was us. Right. I can give you one example. When I was ambassador in Australia, my term was only 3 years. In the space of 3 years, I negotiated to secure a block of land. Because I came from an architectural background, I got an architectural firm to design the building, and we constructed the building. Now, on the day of the official ceremony of the opening of the Embassy of Afghanistan building, one of our countrymen came with his wife. His wife had a scarf, that a gotch on her head. She stood up in front of this building. She said, "Please, God, bless John Howard." John Howard was the Prime Minister of Australia. As if John Howard had built the embassy. while John Howard had no knowledge whatsoever about the embassy. It was us who worked really hard to build it. So, like this, during those 20 years of the Republic, our own talents did a lot. The environment was right for them to become productive.
Right.
And they produced a lot. We need to identify that. Just because of a few corrupt elements, we cannot just say that millions of people who worked with the government of Afghanistan during those 20 years altogether, they were all corrupt.
Right.
That's not right. Or the Taliban are now just saying that whatever was before them, centuries, everything was bad. They are the ones who are good. So really, this is why we need a good, quality, comprehensive review, at least of the 20 years of the Republic, identify the good things that we did, identify the bad things, the mistakes. I just told you one mistake, that we failed to establish the rule of law in Afghanistan. We turned the constitution in our own favor. We twisted the constitution rather than giving ourselves up to the constitution of the country.
Right.
That was one big mistake that we did. We pushed the ethnic politics. We divided the population. When the republic collapsed, our population was scattered all over the place, to the point that it's taken us 3.5 years. Still, we don't have our elite together. We had the opportunity to unify the country. Every country in the world has got ethnic groups. India, very close to our own country, has got probably hundreds, thousands of ethnic groups.
Right.
I'm afraid nowhere is written. It's not written in the Quran or anywhere else that there is a country called Afghanistan and the ethnic groups will not unite. I think it's our failure of negotiating, believing in negotiations, and coming up with a fair formula where the citizens of Afghanistan could enjoy equal rights.
Right.
If you have a look at the history, somehow we have negotiated, we've come up with agreements, but we failed to implement the agreements properly. I was involved in the negotiations of the National Unity Government in 2014. For months, we negotiated. And then as soon as they were signed, a few days later, a couple of weeks later, some of us didn't believe in it. So we have to find a way of communicating, negotiating, putting it on the table, the outcome of our negotiations, whatever we agree on, and having the culture of working with this document, with this agreement.
Right.
I mean, this is how I see it. And this is why, to me, this ethnic argument, what has happened in the history and what did Abdurrahman Khan do and what did this do and what did that do, in total, we have failed to negotiate, to find common ground between the people of that geography called Afghanistan, and work with the agreement. I mean, in our neighboring country, can't you see how many ethnic groups are in Iran? How many ethnic groups are in Pakistan? Anywhere where you go, there are ethnic groups. But what they have done, they have established the rule of law and a governance system. Within the framework of the rule of law and governance systems, officials come and go, but then the system is moving.
Right.
Now, this is why it is crucial that post-Taliban, we should see the genuine, not the nominal, the genuine establishment rule in the country and the governance system.
Right.
Now, what system of governance we have, that's debatable. Some people say that it should be highly centralized. Some people should say that it should be decentralized. It should be a parliamentary system. Some people talk about a federal system. I think right now is not the time to really push that debate. Fair enough, some groups are working. I respect what they're doing, and it's good what they're doing. But right now, we need to go to the transition period from here. And how do we convince the Taliban to do that? Through dialogue, through force, whatever possible. Once you enter there, then we could have the platform where we could think about the system of governance. In my mind, I think we could have a referendum And on that referendum paper, we could have 3 or 4 systems of governance and let the people of Afghanistan decide what they want. This is how I see it.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. The discussion was very insightful and very thought-provoking on many levels, as on the diplomatic level, educational, as well as the missed opportunities that we had in Afghanistan and how we should not repeat that. And I admire your stance that we should focus more on the people inside the country that actually are there, that actually are the future of Afghanistan, as well as those outside, to focus on particular strategies that you emphasized on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.